Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Money Means Business. My name is Ahmed Nader and tonight we're going to focus on the latest economic updates from Egypt and the world in the past week, and more specifically the speech given by Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouri to the Parliament regarding the efforts of the government and the upcoming fiscal year, to be absorbing the negative repercussions of the current war between the United States and Israel and Iran in the Middle East, and more specifically facing the energy consumption for the Egyptians during the summertime. But we'll be starting straight away with the main top stories that took place over the past couple of days. And the IMF has said that Egypt swiftly cushioned the impact of the Middle East war. The director of the Middle East and Central Asia Department at the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, Jihad Azur, said during the virtual IMF panel discussion on the US-Iran war's economic impact that Egypt has moved quickly to cushion the impact of the Middle East war economically, with the growth expected to take only a limited hit so far. But we'll be starting straight away with the main report and Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouri giving the speech in front of the Parliament, and we'll be returning once again to you on Money Means Business, so stay tuned.
S&P Global Ratings has affirmed Egypt's long and short-term foreign and local currency sovereign credit ratings at BB, maintaining a stable outlook, while warning that the ongoing regional conflict due to the US-Israeli war on Iran, launched on the 28th of February, is placing renewed strain on the country's external position. The secured rating means that Egypt can meet its financial obligations, but faces risks, especially from economic shocks or external pressures. Over the short term, the rating indicates that the country still has the capacity to repay its debts. In its report on Egypt, the agency said Egypt remains vulnerable to shocks in global energy and food markets, with external pressures likely to fuel inflation and keep domestic interest rates elevated for a prolonged period. However, it noted that the country now holds stronger external buffers than in previous crises, supported by higher international reserves, a more flexible exchange rate, and continued access to multilateral financing. S&P maintained Egypt's transfer and convertibility assessment at B, stating that the stable outlook reflects a balance between medium-term growth prospects and the ongoing reform momentum against rising geopolitical risks. S&P revised its current account deficit forecast to 4.8% of GDP in the fiscal year 2025-2026, ending late June of 2026, up from 4.1% projected in October of 2025 and 4.2% in the fiscal year 2024-2025. Despite mounting pressures, Egypt has built significant resilience. International reserves rose to $52.8 billion in March of 2026, compared to $41 billion at the onset of the Russia-Ukraine war in 2022. The banking sector's net foreign asset position reached a record $30 billion in January of 2026, providing a cushion against capital outflows. S&P expects any further outflows to be absorbed by banks before impacting reserves. The agency also emphasized Egypt's commitment to a market-determined exchange rate, noting the pound has depreciated by about 13% against the US dollar since the outbreak of the war, with authorities refraining from intervention in line with the International Monetary Fund, the IMF-backed reforms. In this respect, the report added that the Central Bank of Egypt, the CBE, kept its benchmark rates unchanged at 19% for deposits and 20% for lending in April, posing cumulative 825 basis point easing cycle that began in April of 2025. S&P also expects Egypt's inflation rate to average around 15% in the current fiscal year 2025-2026 and the upcoming fiscal year 2026-2027 before easing to 9% by the fiscal year 2028-2029.
Welcome back. You're still watching Money Means Business, and I'm honored to be having with me over the phone to be shedding more light on those important topics for today and for the past week is Dr. Osama Murad, the financial expert. Dr. Osama, thank you very much for being with us tonight on Nile TV International.
It's a pleasure, always.
The pleasure is all mine. First of all, we have seen the speech given by Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madhouli to the Parliament in the past week. I would like to shed more light on the economic measures that were taken by the Egyptian government for the past couple of months, more specifically, ever since the 28th of February and the eruption of the war between the United States and Israel and Iran in the Middle East. How would you assess those economic measures for the benefit of the Egyptian citizen?
Well, it's a very tough time, and the Egyptian government, as all governments around the world, is facing a very critical situation. But the Egyptian government and Prime Minister Madhouli, based on the instructions of President Sisi, is acting and taking the priority to stand by the Egyptian citizens. Because it's a really tough time, so austerity measures cannot be heavy on the normal Egyptian person. We've only seen a slight change in the prices of electricity and gas. Otherwise, the government is trying to absorb the shock.
Yes, Dr. Osama, one of the main statements of Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madhouli is that the government had distributed over 15 million families about 40 billion Egyptian pounds over the past couple of months to be alleviating the suffering economically on the burdens or the shoulders of the Egyptian citizens. How do you see such a sum?
This is, I mean, we have two programs which stand with the ordinary Egyptian citizen, Haya Karima and Takaful Karama, which is dignified life and solidarity. And those two programs are internationally praised and acknowledged, and they do a great job. And the citizens under the poverty line could not have survived without the support. So it was necessary, it was dignified, it was supportive, and this is what we're used to in Egypt.
Yes, and not just about Egypt, because Prime Minister Madhouli spoke about the natural gas bill, something that the world, the whole globe is being affected negatively during the war between the United States and Israel and Iran in the Middle East. The oil prices have skyrocketed, as well as the natural gas as well. How did you see the steps taken by the Egyptian government, and how do you see and how do you look into the future after the war, if it ended today, because the negotiations are still ongoing, but we do know that the negative repercussions, the negative impacts will be felt during the upcoming years and not just months?
Yes, you're fully right. The effects of the war are with us regardless if the war stops or not. If the war does not stop, the effects will be magnified. If it stops, we will have a longevity of the effects. The most important step the government took is hedging, as per the finance minister, 50% of our need of imports of gas prices. So we have locked in a price which we can afford, which is good. Then we have signed two major agreements, one with Israel worth $35 billion to import the gas. And the other one, which is even the same significance, is taking off all the Cypriot gas. So Egypt will have an abundance of gas, especially if combined with the new findings in the Mediterranean, in addition to the Israeli and the Cypriot gas. So Egypt will be as a gas hub. And if we follow the Saudi strategic PFI meetings, which put a new logistics hub where oil will be transferred via pipes to the Red Sea, from the Red Sea to Safaga, and then to the Mediterranean. Theoretically, we can absorb shocks in the future and actually can provide energy to the rest of the region.
Dr. Osama, you've mentioned the agreements that Egypt has signed during the past couple of months or during the past period after the eruption of the war in the Middle East. How do you see the benefits that could be coming out of such a war for Egypt? And because we have seen on the other side for the GCC countries such as Saudi Arabia and Bahrain and Qatar and the United Arab Emirates, they have been negatively impacted. Can we be using such an opportunity to be having other investments coming from the GCC countries or investments that were earmarked to be going to the GCC countries instead to be heading towards Egypt in the months to come?
Both can be true. Investments which were heading through GCC markets will not change direction to Egypt. They are totally different markets. But we can attract GCC investments which were earmarked or not earmarked because Egypt has come out of the region as a safe, reliable economy.
Yes. Now, what is the importance?
It's the first time,
yes.
Sorry to interrupt. It's the first time that hot money has left Egypt and returned less than 2 weeks away.
What is the importance of the political stability and the safety that we are having here in Egypt, more specifically under the tenure of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi ever since 2014, to be drawing more investments?
Extremely important. The whole world knows that President Sisi is a reliable man who has set peace as a strategic objective. Egypt is the flagship of peace. We are a mediator in all conflicts. We were a mediator in the Gaza war. We are a mediator now in the Iranian-Israeli-US conflict. We are a mediator in Sudan. We are a mediator in Libya. So to be able to play the role of the mediator, you have to be a real advocate of peace and stability, which Egypt has taken as a strategic direction.
Yes, and speaking about safety and stability, today we are celebrating the 44th anniversary of the liberation of Sinai, and as you mentioned, Dr. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi was participating yesterday in an informal European Union summit with the regional partners such as Egypt, from the Middle East and from the Arab world, and this says a lot, as you mentioned. But we have seen over the past week one of the main statements of Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouri in front of the Parliament is that Egypt has coordinated the efforts between the Ministry of Finance and the Central Bank of Egypt to be drawing from the reserves that we have had here, reaching about $52.8 billion at the end of March. How do you see the importance of this coordination and the efforts of the Central Bank of Egypt to be having the availability of the foreign currency reserves ready?
When the government and the central bank coordinate, the economy runs well in any part of the world. If they don't coordinate, we have mixed directions. It is very important that the monetary and economic policy are aligned. And I think the current period, especially under Hassan Abdullah, head of the government, the governor of the central bank, and Prime Minister Madbouri, we're seeing the utmost coordination between both parties, which is extremely important because that's the way we can absorb the shocks. There are shocks. Egypt is not immune to shocks, but Egypt has been able to prove it can survive those shocks, absorb those shocks, and come out stronger or come out safely out of those shocks. Because those shocks are external, but we are deeply affected. We're trying to do our best, and I think that happens only with the coordination.
Yes, we have seen the conflict in the Middle East for the past couple of months, and Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli and President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi have always said that this crisis could be prolonged for months and maybe until the end of the year and maybe beyond that. How do you see the multiple scenarios shown by the Egyptian government to be facing such an economic crisis?
Well, it's a long-term approach. Personally, I think the war will end very soon. The U.S. is hosting the World Cup, and somehow before the World Cup, everything has to end. Otherwise, that's a totally different ball game. And I think also that the U.S. realized it cannot win this war. It's trying through negotiations to get some win for face saving or for long-term economic impact. And at some time, this will happen, but the crisis might extend till the end of the year because we could move into a situation of no peace, no war, stalemate till end of the year.
Yes, but yes, Doctor.
Yeah.
For the first half of the year, we have seen the growth rate of Egypt reaching about 5.3%. How would you see the growth rates that could be achieved for the rest of the year and the years to come, especially that the Egyptian economy have gone through a lot for the past 5 or 6 years, including the Russian-Ukrainian conflict and the COVID-19 pandemic?
Definitely in the coming half, we will not be able to achieve those 5.3.
Yes.
We are aiming 4.6, 4.7, which would be fantastic. Then the year would average the 5%. And I think it's possible.
Yes, but on the other hand, we are aiming for about 3.8 trillion Egyptian pounds in terms of investments for the upcoming fiscal year 2026-2027. How do you see such an ambition? Could we be surpassing such a figure?
Yes, but this depends on the revival of the privatization or government asset sales program. Because Egypt's biggest problem currently is the debt service, and you cannot spend on infrastructure and the rest of the budget if you have to pay so much in interest and debt repayment. So the alternative is the debt for equity or selling shares of companies and thus bringing in equity money to the Egyptian economy, enabling Egypt to reach those trillions.
Yes, but of the total figure of the investment, we are aiming for about 60% by the participation of the private sector. How do you see such a goal? Could it be done?
We have done it twice before. It could be done provided all the government entities really believe in that and contribute to that.
On the other hand, as we have seen the global crisis in terms of the oil prices skyrocketing and affecting the whole world, including the United States and Iran and Israel, the countries participating in the war, we are shifting towards the renewable energy. We need to be diversifying such a file according to the directives of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. In your opinion, as an economic expert, how do you see this main goal? How do you see the future for Egypt, especially that we have the resources?
Well, renewable energy is definitely a great choice. Unfortunately, till now, the break-even of renewable energy is traditionally longer than fossil fuel-based energy. And that's the country's ability to invest in wind or solar or other sustainable energy sources might be hampered by budget constraints. So in order to achieve this, the government is doing a great model, which we have seen with the Norwegian Sovereign Fund, where foreign investors are invited to participate in those projects, thus achieving sustainable energy and achieving private sector participation. We've seen this with the Norwegian Fund. We've seen this joint venture between one of Egypt's biggest companies and a Japanese major multinational. So we have several projects where the private sector is taking the lead in sustainable energy, specifically wind at that current stage, and investing in that.
Yes, Dr. Usaim, let's see the statements of the International Monetary Fund regarding cushioning the impact of the war in the Middle East against the Egyptian economy, as the IMF said that Egypt had swiftly cushioned the impact of this war. How do you see the statements of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, for that matter, for the past couple of months?
It's a very precise statement, as what the government did, and this is the first time, is that the reaction was extremely fast. Less than a week before the war broke out, immediately after price changes, the government did what the IMF called cushioning, which is giving the Egyptian economy a buffer. Of course, it means price increases or inflation, but it is very important to sustain the health of the economy and the macroeconomy and Egypt's budget.
Yes, Doctor, and we have seen during or within the statements of the International Monetary Fund regarding the moving quickly, as you mentioned, swiftly after the war had erupted on the 28th of February between the United States and Israel and Iran, is that there was a mix of policy tools that were used to be cushioning such impacts. How do you see the importance of having this diversity of tools to be dealing with during such hard times?
This is what we've been always advising the government to do. Once you put your mindset into being agile and try to systematically cushion, you then find alternatives, are able to find different alternatives to situations. And you will not deal with situations the same. At this time, the major impact felt by people was an increase in prices, but also a reduction in opening hours for stores, restaurants, and cafes, thus minimizing the demand, which is on electricity and fuel both ways, because you're reducing traffic.
Yes, and another top story that what we have seen over the past week is that Egypt is intending to be having a logistics hub for oil and grain trading as well. How do you see the importance of such a step by the Egyptian government to be having food security even with better rates into the future?
Okay, this is extremely important, and this is a focal point. As mentioned in the beginning of our interview, now Egypt has a mix of energy locally. Besides that, it has Israeli gas, it will have Cypriot gas, and as per the Saudi strategic initiative, it will have a lot of the Gulf oil. So Egypt will act as a regional hub for gas and oil, because in that way you avoid the Strait of Hormuz and you avoid Bab el-Mandab. So all the bottlenecks will be avoided because those gas and oil will then be directly exported from the Mediterranean to the client, which is Europe and the West. That's one point. Regarding grain,
Yes.
and what we have learned and the rest of the world has really learned from the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, they are the two main producers, and the world markets are constantly affected by who's doing what in the war. Egypt, as the largest wheat importer in the world, strategically is poisoned to have the center of wheat and grain trading in Egypt, thus ensuring its own supply, but also ensuring the supply to Africa and the rest of the world. Because once the Russian and Ukrainian, and I think these are the main target markets, which will export or use Egypt as a hub, then it becomes theoretically Egyptian grain and wheat, and avoids any kind of embargo or politicizing whatever wheat and grain that is.
Yes, and finally, Dr. Osama, we have seen the participation of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi yesterday in the European Union informal summit, along with the regional and the Arab partners as well. And we have seen the warm reception given from the Cypriot President Nikos Christodoulidis to His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, and both of them signing the declaration of intent to be elevating the bilateral ties between Egypt and Cyprus into a strategic partnership. How do you see the importance of this partnership in terms of the oil and gas drilling in the Mediterranean in specific, and the economic cooperation in general between both countries?
People don't realize, and this is very important, that Egypt and the European Union as a whole signed a strategic comprehensive partnership agreement. And this is the agreement whereby the European Union committed to invest 9.6 billion euros in Egypt.
Yes.
Part of that is for energy security of Europe, because the Cypriot gas will land naturally in Egypt and then be exported as electricity to Europe. And I think this is the first step until we also do the same deal with Greece and receive the Greek gas in Egypt and convert it into electricity, and then through the two electricity lines which will be constructed under the Mediterranean, one towards Greece and one towards Italy. Instead of exporting gas, Egypt will export manufactured gas into electricity.
Yes, Dr. Osama Murad, the financial expert, thank you very much for being with us tonight on Nile TV International and Money Means Business. And this brings us to the end of this episode for this week of Money Means Business. Thank you for watching, and I'll be seeing you next week.